I'm a 35-year-old guy who's been practicing law for a little over a decade now. I specialize in property and civil litigation, though I don't exactly go around wearing a badge that says, "Hi, I'm a lawyer." Most of the time, it's better to keep that little detail under wraps. People either expect free legal advice on the spot or start acting weird, like every word they say is being recorded for court. So unless it's absolutely necessary, I just let people assume I've got some vague desk job. My wife, Stacy, and I have been married for 6 years now. We've got a great relationship, built on trust, shared goals, and a mutual understanding that when her mother, Patty, gets involved, we need to brace ourselves. Patty is, to put it politely, a force of nature. To put it less politely, she's a controlling, opinionated whirlwind who always thinks she knows best about everything all the time. From the moment I met her, she made it clear she wasn't thrilled that I was dating her daughter. I wasn't rich, didn't come from some big-name family, didn't go to Harvard or own a yacht. I was just some middle-class guy who worked his tail off to become a lawyer, which, to be fair, is no small feat. But to Patty, I was the guy dragging her daughter away from the cushy fantasy life she had imagined for her. Stacy grew up in a close family, but it was Patty who orchestrated every part of that closeness. She dictated what vacations they went on, what everyone wore to family dinners, and which cousin was bringing what side dish to Thanksgiving. She's the type of woman who calls it helping when she rewrites your wedding seating chart without asking. At first, I tried to play nice. I smiled, nodded through her passive-aggressive comments, and told myself it was just garden-variety mother-in-law behavior. But over time, it became clear that Patty didn't see me as family, she saw me as an obstacle. She'd make comments like, "Oh, you're a lawyer? Stacy's ex is in finance. His dad practically owns half of downtown." Or, "You must be busy with all those long hours. I hope Stacy's not home alone too much." The worst part? She always said it with a smile, that fake, polite smile that says, "I'm insulting you, but good luck calling me out without looking crazy." Fortunately, Stacy always had my back. She wasn't afraid to shut her mom down. But even so, Patty always found ways to slip the knives in between polite words. And then came the beach house. That's when things really took a turn, and not in a subtle way. 2 years ago, my uncle passed away. He was a quiet man, not much for family gatherings, but he had always treated me kindly. In his will, he left me a small beach house, a modest 2-bedroom place tucked away on the coast. It wasn't glamorous by any means. The paint was chipped, the roof leaked when it rained too hard, and the plumbing sounded like it belonged in a horror movie. But the moment Stacy and I stepped inside, we saw its potential. It had character, charm, and most of all, it was ours. We decided we'd fix it up and use it as a weekend getaway. Somewhere to escape the stress of work and family obligations. A little haven, just for us. But of course, word got around. And the minute Patty heard the phrase beach house, something in her shifted. At first, it was subtle. Little comments sprinkled into conversation like poison. "A beach house is a huge responsibility, you know." Or, "Are you two really in a place financially to maintain a second property?" That kind of condescending concern that's more accusation than question. She always framed it as though she was worried about us, but there was something lurking underneath. An agenda I couldn't quite pin down yet. Then it escalated. She started dropping by unannounced. Which, mind you, meant driving over an hour from her house to just happen to be in the neighborhood. She'd show up with a pie or a casserole and peek into rooms while pretending to compliment our decor. Once or twice, she made offhand comments like, "This would be a great spot for a big family Christmas," or, "I can just see the grandkids running around here one day." But the kicker came when our neighbor Frank called me one afternoon. Frank's an old retired Navy guy who knows everything that happens within a 2-block radius. He told me he'd seen a woman with what he described as a hairdo you could spot from a mile away poking around our house while we weren't home. That hair? Classic Patty. I didn't even have to ask twice. When I confronted her, she acted like I was being paranoid. "I was just making sure everything was okay," she said with that trademark innocence. "I thought I saw someone lurking nearby and got worried." Uh-huh. Sure, Patty. Very convincing. Not long after that, things started to feel off. Little things. The spare key that used to be hidden under the flower pot was mysteriously missing. A lamp had been moved. The curtains were pulled closed when I distinctly remembered leaving them open. Stacy thought I was imagining things, and I tried to convince myself I was too, but my gut said otherwise. Then, one afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found a folder sitting on the table. It hadn't been there when I left. Inside were printed documents, copies of the deed, maps of the property lines, zoning reports. My name was on everything. But what really got me were the handwritten notes in the margins. Phrases like family asset, should be preserved, and the cherry on top, Patty, scribbled in red ink next to the property title. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just meddling. She was planning something. Something big. I knew better than to confront her immediately. As a lawyer, one of the first things you learn is that the best advantage in any conflict is information. Let your opponent make the mistake. Let them feel confident. Then you strike when you're holding all the cards. So I said nothing. I quietly installed a few small cameras, nothing invasive, just discrete devices in the entryway, living room, and kitchen. Common areas. I didn't even tell Stacy. I didn't want her stressing out unless there was something concrete. And sure enough, within a week, there she was. Clear as day, caught on camera. Patty, walking right in like she owned the place, using a key she was never supposed to have. She wandered through the house, took pictures, moved things around, and then calmly let herself out. When I showed Stacy the footage, her face went cold. She copied the key, she said quietly. She actually did it. It was like a dam broke. Stacy had tried so hard to defend her mom, to rationalize her behavior. But this was deliberate. She called her right away, voice shaking with rage. Patty, of course, denied everything. Said she'd found the key outside and thought it was best to bring it back. When Stacy said we had her on camera, Patty changed her tune, suddenly playing the helpful mother just trying to make sure the house was safe. Stacy told her, in no uncertain terms, to stay away from the property. No more visits. No more snooping. No more keys. Patty got quiet after that. For a while, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, she got the message. I should have known better. About 6 months later, we were up at the beach house one weekend. I was enjoying a bagel on the porch, sipping coffee, when Stacy called me inside with a strange tone in her voice. You need to see this. I stepped into the living room, and there she was. Patty. In the flesh. And not alone. Beside her stood a man in a wrinkled suit, carrying a briefcase that looked like it belonged in an 80s courtroom drama. Patty smiled like nothing was wrong. Good morning. This is Todd, my attorney. We need to talk about some important family matters. I nearly choked on my coffee. You're what? My lawyer, she repeated, completely unfazed. We've been discussing the future of this house. I've decided it would be best if it were transferred to someone with more long-term vision. She said it like she was doing us a favor, like we should be thanking her. I was so stunned, I let her talk. Todd, meanwhile, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Patty sat at the kitchen table, snapped her fingers at him, and he obediently pulled out a stack of papers. This, she said, tapping the top document, is a transfer of ownership. You and Stacy just need to sign here, and everything will be settled. I looked at the document. It was a joke. Sloppy formatting, vague language, typos galore. It looked like someone had cobbled it together from a bad internet template. My instincts kicked in. Interesting, I said, glancing at Todd. Where did you go to law school, Todd? He blinked. I didn't finish. Okay, I said, keeping my tone friendly. No problem. What's your bar number? He fumbled. I'm not officially licensed yet. I nodded, pretending to take it in. So, you're not a lawyer. Todd looked like he might pass out. Patty jumped in, flustered. Let's not get distracted by technicalities. The important thing is... No, Stacy cut in. The important thing is you brought a fake lawyer to our house and expected us to just hand it over. Patty bristled. It's not fake. Todd is perfectly capable. I interrupted. Okay, then maybe he can explain the difference between a quitclaim deed and a warranty deed? Todd opened his mouth, closed it, sweated, said nothing. That's what I thought. At this point, I stood up, slowly, letting the silence settle like dust in the air. Patty's smug expression had started to crack, and Todd looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I walked over to my briefcase, took out a folder of my own, and laid it gently on the kitchen table, like a chess player placing their queen in the winning spot. As a practicing attorney, I said, flipping open the folder, I have a few concerns. Patty's eyes widened. You're a lawyer? Yep, I replied, deliberately popping the P. 10 years and counting. And these documents? They're not just laughable. They're borderline fraudulent. I walked them through it, line by line. I explained the legal inconsistencies, the unenforceable clauses, the complete lack of notarization. Todd shrank with every word. Patty grew redder and redder, her hands clenching the armrest like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. When I finished, I turned my laptop around and opened an email. "This," I said, "is from the county clerk's office. It confirms multiple unauthorized inquiries into the title history of this property. All trace back to your email address, Patty." Her face drained of color. "I was just looking out for the family," she sputtered. "By trying to steal our house?" Stacy snapped. "You crossed a line, Mom. You've been crossing it for months." Patty stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "We're leaving, Todd." Todd didn't need a second invitation. He grabbed his briefcase, stumbled out the door like he was escaping a hostage situation, and Patty followed, but not before turning at the threshold. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Then she was gone. The silence that followed was thick. Stacy and I stood there for a moment, not saying a word. Then she exhaled, a deep, tired breath, and muttered, "I'm going to need wine for this." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only reaction left. "That," I said, pouring us both a glass, "was one for the family history books." But I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Patty wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat. She'd lost the battle, sure. But the war? I had a strong feeling she was just getting started. After Patty's grand transfer the house to me scheme crumbled, you'd think she might finally take a breath, do some soul-searching, and realize just how insane the whole thing had been. But this was Patty. Reflection was never her strong suit. No, instead, she switched into full-blown damage control, or at least, her version of it. Which meant one thing, calling every single relative like she was running a political campaign. Her narrative? That I was a manipulative, conniving husband who had turned her sweet daughter against her. I was brainwashing Stacy, isolating her from her family, and wait for it, stealing what was rightfully hers. According to Patty, I was practically rubbing my hands together in a dark room, twirling my lawyer mustache while plotting the downfall of the family legacy. The sheer drama of it would have made a great soap opera. Now, Stacy's family is close-knit, lots of Sunday dinners and birthday group texts, but they're not gullible. Most of them already knew Patty had a flair for melodrama. They'd seen her in action for years, pulling stunts and spinning stories like it was a competitive sport. Still, a few of them reached out to me directly, curious. One uncle called and asked in a whisper, "Did she really bring a fake lawyer?" I told him the whole story, and he actually choked laughing. "She's bold, I'll give her that," he said. "But you handled it like a pro." Another cousin, less amused, said, "Patty's been saying you're controlling Stacy, that you don't let her make decisions." I replied, "If I'm so controlling, how come I let Stacy choose the wedding venue, the honeymoon spot, and the color of our bathroom towels?" He laughed and said, "Fair enough." But of course, not everyone was reasonable. Patty's sister Beverly, her loyal shadow, bought the whole story wholesale. She called Stacy in full preacher mode. "I just don't understand why you're letting your husband come between you and your own mother," she scolded. "My husband didn't try to steal our house," Stacy snapped back. "Mom did." "Well," Beverly said, with the confidence of someone who had not seen a single shred of evidence, "that's not what she told me." "Of course it's not," Stacy said, her voice flat. "Because if she told you the truth, you'd have to admit how unhinged this all is." Beverly tried to keep arguing, but Stacy ended the call with, "I was there. I saw what she did." End of discussion. When Stacy hung up, I looked over at her. Her jaw was tight, her eyes full of anger. "I don't even know why I bother with her," she muttered. "They always twist everything." I nodded. "Because they're used to getting away with it." This time, they didn't. But Patty wasn't done. Not even close. Once the phone calls started losing their effect, she escalated, like she always did. She began making appearances at family gatherings with the air of a martyr who'd just been exiled from her kingdom. She'd sit in the corner, dabbing her eyes with tissues like she was at a funeral, whispering to anyone who'd listen, "I don't know if I'll ever see my daughter again." Or, "It's just heartbreaking when family forgets the meaning of loyalty." It was vintage Patty, heavy on the dramatics, light on the truth. At first, Stacy and I brushed it off. Let her have her performance. Most people saw right through it. But then came the twist we didn't expect. Her antics spilled into her professional life. One afternoon, Stacy got a call from her cousin, the one who worked in HR at Patty's company. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, putting Stacy on speaker. "Patty got fired." "What?" Stacy blinked. "Why?" She was using her work email to look up private property info. Stuff about the beach house. Sending emails to some sketchy account, talking about ownership disputes. Stacy turned to me stunned. "She lost her job. Over us?" I just shook my head. She really thought no one would find out? The fallout was fast and brutal. Her coworkers found out. Then extended family. Within days, the calls started pouring in again, but this time, they weren't accusing. They were apologizing. "I'm sorry," one cousin said. "I didn't realize how deep this went. I knew she could be a little intense. But this is next level insanity." Another aunt said she always had a way of rewriting history. But getting fired over it? That's on her. Stacy and I felt vindicated, sure, but also exhausted. You'd think losing her job might have humbled Patty. Instead, she pivoted again, playing the concerned mom card. We started getting messages from random acquaintances. "Patty says she's really worried about you guys." Or she mentioned that you're overwhelmed managing the house. "Do you need help?" It didn't take a genius to see what she was doing. She was planting little seeds, trying to spin the narrative again. Poor Stacy and her naive husband. Can't handle the pressure. I wanted to confront her, but Stacy just sighed. Let her dig. Every time she opens her mouth, she just proves our point. She was right. Even her diehard supporters, like Beverly, were starting to grow quiet. But just when we thought we could breathe, Patty pulled her boldest stunt yet. About a month later, we got a certified letter in the mail. It was from a real law office this time, with a legit address, licensed attorney, and all the formal bells and whistles. Patty was suing us. At first, I laughed. I genuinely thought it had to be a prank. But the more I read, the more absurd it got. She claimed she had invested in the beach house, had contributed to renovations and maintenance, and now she was demanding a legal stake in the property. Never mind the fact that the house was explicitly willed to Stacy and me. Never mind the fact that we had receipts for every nail, tile, and pipe replaced. Patty's evidence was nowhere to be seen. Because, of course, it didn't exist. Stacy was livid. She didn't pay for a single light bulb, and now she wants to sue us? She's banking on confusion and drama, I said. She thinks she can throw mud and something will stick. But she underestimated us again. We lawyered up. Or, rather, I dusted off my litigation gear. I gathered everything. The will, bank statements, every home improvement invoice, even the footage from the cameras we'd installed. I was ready. Court day came. Patty showed up in full regalia, loud jewelry, dramatic blouse, and a smug look like she'd just won the lottery. Her lawyer looked less convinced, probably because he'd already sensed there wasn't much of a case. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't go for drama. I just stuck to the facts. "Your Honor," I said, "there's no financial trail, no agreement, and no logic to this lawsuit. The house was a gift, a clear inheritance. The plaintiff has zero legal standing." Then I walked the court through our receipts, our signed will, and our communication logs. I even submitted emails between us and the contractors, none of which mentioned Patty at all. When it was Patty's turn to testify, she launched into full Broadway mode. "I was only trying to help," she said, wringing her hands like a soap opera star. They were overwhelmed. I offered guidance, support, and I even paid cash for some things. The judge tilted her head. "Do you have any proof of these payments?" "Well, no, it was family. We don't keep track of that kind of thing." "Any witnesses? Bank statements? Emails?" Patty's face twitched. "No, it was informal. By the time I got up for cross-examination, it was like boxing a paperback. I asked her basic questions, dates, contractor names, payment methods. She fumbled every one. When I finished, the judge looked unimpressed. She turned to Patty and said, "You brought this lawsuit with no documentation, no legal agreement, and no credibility. This court does not entertain petty family disputes disguised as legal matters." And with that, case dismissed. As Stacy and I walked out of the courtroom, hand in hand, I looked over at Patty. She wasn't smug anymore, just stunned, and for the first time in a long time, silent. You'd think after being publicly humiliated in court, Patty would finally back off. Maybe take a long look in the mirror, reevaluate her priorities, and let us live our lives in peace. But this was Patty we were dealing with. She didn't retreat. She rebranded. Within days of the court ruling, we started hearing whispers. Mutual friends, extended relatives, even coworkers were suddenly concerned about us. "Patty says she's just heartbroken," one of Stacy's aunts told her. "She says she never meant for it to go so far. She's telling people we manipulated the judge," another cousin said. "That the legal system failed a loving mother." It was like watching a PR campaign unfold in real time, but one run by someone who thought Facebook posts and emotional blackmail were legally binding. She posted vague statuses. Sometimes love means letting go, even if they don't understand yet. She started using phrases like estranged from my daughter and praying for healing in my family. The kicker? She even changed her profile picture to a black and white photo of Stacy as a child. I can't believe she's using my face like I'm dead, Stacy muttered one evening. This is so manipulative it's almost art. Meanwhile, I was fielding awkward questions from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, man, is it true you cut your mother-in-law out of the will? What? Yeah, she said you're trying to erase her from the family legacy. Unbelievable. I wanted to respond, to clap back, to burn the whole narrative down. But Stacy said it best. She's running out of rope. Let her hang herself. So we stayed silent. We didn't engage. And the silence, oh, it killed her. A few weeks later, she tried to reach out again. A handwritten letter this time, carefully worded in her finest cursive. She called the lawsuit a misunderstanding, said she acted out of love, and asked if we could meet for a peaceful reconciliation. There was no apology, no ownership, just more soft manipulation disguised as motherly concern. Stacy read it once, sighed, and tossed it in the shredder. She had her chance, she said. She used the court system to try and take what wasn't hers. Now she can live with the consequences. And with that, it was over. For real this time. It's been several months since that final letter. Since the courtroom showdown, the social media circus, and the tear-streaked voicemails. And for the first time in years, our life is quiet. The beach house? It's everything we hoped it would be. We finally finished the repairs on our own terms, with our money. We painted the walls a calming sea glass blue, replaced the squeaky doors, and even planted a little herb garden out back. Every time I sit on that porch with a cup of coffee and look out at the waves, I feel something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not just the kind that comes from silence, the kind that comes from boundaries. Stacy and I are stronger than ever. Going through hell together tends to either break you or bond you tighter. For us, it was the latter. We laugh more now. We fight less. We make time for each other, real time, not just passing glances between drama. As for Patty, she's still around, technically, but only in the periphery. Stacy keeps her at arm's length. A polite birthday text. A quick thanks if Patty sends a generic holiday card. That's it. No visits. No calls. No access. And while Patty occasionally tries to test those boundaries, a random email, a message through a cousin, Stacy doesn't flinch anymore. She sees it for what it is, an attempt to claw back control she never should have had in the first place. Looking back, I realize how close we came to letting her sabotage our life. How subtle manipulation can build up like sediment, weighing everything down until you don't even recognize the version of yourself underneath it. But not anymore. Now, every inch of our home feels earned. Every corner, every creak in the floor, every sunset from the back deck, they're ours. And no amount of scheming, fake lawyers, or crocodile tears will ever take that away.